This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. My boyfriend has depression. Medication and expert consultations cost over $10,000 a month. To cure him, I work day and night, taking on art commissions and delivering takeout, while my friends warn me to be careful not to overwork myself to death. Until one day, I snagged a delivery order from a wealthy villa district. A high-end Japanese takeout worth $18,000 was handed over to the customer with utmost respect. When I looked up, however, I saw my boyfriend, who should have been at a psychological counseling session, standing at the door, staring at me in disbelief. "You shouldn't be here, Rocky." I glanced at the elegantly decorated villa. My left hand, holding the takeout box, was clenched so tightly it hurt. Despite the temperature reaching 40 degrees Celsius, I felt like I had fallen into an ice cellar, trembling. I had only seen places like this in idol dramas. "Sorry, Haley, let me explain. Dr. Lou had an emergency this afternoon. I just came to hang out with a friend." Caught off guard by this sudden confrontation, Rocky awkwardly grabbed my sleeve. It was his usual apologetic gesture. It worked every time, but at this moment, it was ineffective. I coldly brushed his hand away. His custom shirt was a brand I couldn't name, yet it was ironic, fitting his wealthy son demeanor better than any basic outfit. I lowered my gaze and pulled out my phone to check the appointment page for Washington Hospital. After finding that Dr. Lou still had openings today, I lost interest in exposing him. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my thoughts and calmly said, "Rocky, was it fun? Pretending to be a poor boy with depression beside me, unwilling to spend even on a cup of milk tea. In reality, you're a rich heir who orders a meal for $18,000. I felt my lips move as I angrily glared at the man in front of me, not even aware of when my eyes filled with tears. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to fall for this? $18,000. I need to run 6,000 deliveries to cover that. It'll take me 2 months. The most ridiculous thing was the only screen still active on my phone. It was a message I had sent Rocky half an hour ago. I told him I'd make him his favorite lotus root soup tonight. Because the customer in the wealthy district was generous, they tipped 100 yuan. I never imagined that this tip was given to me by Rocky himself. Rocky often held me at night, saying that I was the only one he never doubted in love. Even his parents' love for him didn't compare to my purity. These whispers once made me feel lucky to be a rare gem in a world where sincerity was scarce. But looking back now, it seems no one would be foolish enough to risk heatstroke for 5 yuan in temperature supplement, just to gather his medical fees for this month. I haven't slept more than 5 hours in a long time, dreaming of your recovery. You know this better than anyone, don't you?" My voice trembled with accusation. Rocky, who had appeared calm, showed a crack in his demeanor, his eyes slightly red as he nodded. In that cramped old apartment, it took half an hour to walk to the subway station. He watched me struggle, saw me stretch 1 yuan into 2, watched me awkwardly yet desperately pay for a hypocritical experiential game, just to treat his made-up depression. He remained like a creator, coldly observing. "I'll transfer some money to your bank card as compensation. I'm sorry about this." Rocky's head hung low, guilt and a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Realizing he couldn't salvage the situation, he simply gave up. My fingers stiffly pulled out the crumpled order slip from my pocket, half a meter long, filled with the highest quality meats. I then crumpled it into a ball and hurled it at him with all my might. Rocky didn't dodge, his expression filled with sadness and regret. The air conditioning brought a slight chill, and under the sound of cicadas, footsteps approached from nearby. Accompanying that was a girl's teasing voice. "Rocky, haven't you picked up the takeout yet? I'm starving." Rocky and I stopped our standoff. His expression shifted slightly. As we turned to look, we saw a young girl in a lace nightgown walking toward us. Rocky hurriedly stepped forward to block her. "What are you doing out here? I'll be back inside in a second. Go in first." But the girl seemed determined to find out. She walked past Rocky, smiled at me, her apricot eyes revealing a hint of familiarity and disdain. "Who is this?" No one responded. Seeing our mutual silence, she curled her lips into a smirk. Then, naturally, she linked her arm with Rocky's and adjusted her slightly sheer, pale pink nightgown. The marks on her neck and the curves beneath the fabric were evident. She leaned against Rocky, fragile and delicate. His uneasy gaze fell on me. Despairingly, I turned my head, barely closing my eyes. Sweat-soaked hair clung to my face. The throbbing pain at my temples was relentless. No matter how dense I was, I should have known what had happened. I initially thought I was just a poor player in the rich experience game, but now it seemed I was merely a seasoning in a rich kid's love story. How unlucky. So I didn't want to linger anymore, turned around to pick up the takeout box, preparing to leave. But the girl suddenly called out to me. "Wait, are you Rocky's poor girlfriend he's seeing outside of school?" I didn't recognize you in the delivery uniform. You're Haley from the law school, right? I paused, turning to look at her. Half a minute later, I finally recognized her. She was Alice, my senior, from a privileged background and beautiful, adored by many. But we had a history. She had covertly helped someone snatch my financial aid, so I never treated her like the other people around. Seeing my darkened expression, Alice tightened her grip on Rocky's arm. Feigning joy, she spoke sweetly. Rocky, I didn't expect you to actually help me deal with that pretentious junior I complained about last year. After you asked a few questions, you really helped me get Haley. I admire that tactic. It's so clever. Alice glanced at me with a smirk, continuing. Clever enough to make our college's talented girl, Haley, dance around like a dog. My hands, hanging by my sides, slowly balled into fists. The cold air conditioning blew on me, yet I felt no relief. For these people, the struggles of ordinary folks, prospects, emotions, finances, and sweat, were like weeds by the roadside. They not only ignored them, but also trampled on them and spat. Alice kissed Rocky on the cheek, as if rewarding him for having mocked me this far, her eyes glancing provocatively at me. Then, as if recalling something, her expression turned strange and manic as she asked, Haley, did Rocky say he has depression? I furrowed my brow, not denying it. Seeing my reaction, the woman immediately doubled over in laughter. What she said sent chills down my spine. That's because I told Rocky you have a brother who committed suicide because of depression. As long as Rocky claims he has depression, you'd surely fall for it without thinking. Sure enough, as soon as the words fell, the air momentarily froze, leaving only the sound of cicadas. My mind exploded, losing reason in an instant. I bit my lip, took off my delivery helmet, and crazily smashed it towards Rocky. If I continue to endure this, I might as well open a bun shop tomorrow. My chest heaved violently as I shouted, Depression, huh? Pretending to be poor, right? Like to poke at others' pain, huh? You deserve it. Your parents don't love you, you beast. It's deserved that your dad hits your mom in front of you. Why didn't he just beat you to death? Today, I'll beat you to death instead. In the year I spent with Rocky, whether acting or genuinely feeling, we shared our vulnerabilities, so I understood that he could never let go of his parents' indifference and neglect, which deprived him of family love from a young age. At this moment, this became the weapon I used to verbally attack him. Before they could react, I struck Rocky's face again and again. Anger surged within me, and I gasped for breath, the long hours without rest making my head dizzy. When Alice mentioned my brother Jack, the sanity I'd held onto for the afternoon shattered. He was my forbidden zone, a line no one could cross, until Alice pulled me away. Rocky hadn't fought back. He covered his mouth, hands stained with blood. Are you okay, Rocky? I'll call the police. This crazy woman is risking her life, daring to hit you. I'll get my dad. Alice's voice was filled with anger and a hint of tears, but Rocky held her hand and shook his head. Don't, please don't. It's all my fault. He tidied his disheveled hair and walked in front of me. From his pocket, he took out a golden card and handed it to me. The password is your birthday. I know things can't be fixed, but forget it. I'm sorry. I let out a cold laugh, looking into his eyes, which held only coldness and hatred. Die earlier. I yanked the golden card from his fingers, turned, and left with that sentence. There was $770,000 in the card. After asking the delivery company's boss to settle my wages, I quit my job, a 23 square meter studio. I could see straight to the end. When Rocky and I moved out of the dorm, he said his depression was worsening, so he wanted me to be with him every day. At first, I wasn't unprepared for Rocky, who had stormed into my life with reckless courage. But seeing he and my brother shared the same condition, I softened and became confused. For a moment, I couldn't tell if my feelings for him were mostly love, or a desperate compensation for my boundless guilt towards my brother. I just crazily, obsessively wanted to help Rocky cure his depression, as if that would ease the nightmare I couldn't escape. Speaking of which, a year has passed, and I had accumulated quite a bit, but the couple items we had together were glaring, so I threw everything into the trash can. Listening to the old air conditioner whir, I stared at the ceiling, slowly drifting away from the relentless toil day and night, falling into a deep sleep. In my dreams, I've lost count of how many times I dreamt of Jack in the bathtub. He lay pale and lifeless in the crimson liquid, his body white like a porcelain doll, devoid of warmth and sound. The pill bottle had fallen at his drooping fingertips, his long eyelashes gently closed, just as they had when he'd wait for me to finish studying and doze off. but this time, he would never open his eyes again, never rub his sleepy eyes and ask when I'd sleep. In my phone, he cleared all chats with everyone, leaving me only a message, "Sorry, sister," along with a transfer of $3,569.81. That was all the money in his pockets. In that splendid spring, Jack, a child of destiny, left during the best of times. And I was forever trapped in that spring. The rustle of a plastic bag behind the door woke me. A man in a black shirt was squatting by the trash can, sneaking around, rummaging through something. Who? The man paused, slowly turning around. It was Rocky, still wearing a mask, his face bandaged in several places. I rubbed my aching forehead, forgetting he still had the key to the apartment. The couple rings, water cups, watches, and memorabilia I had thrown in the trash were now pulled out, neatly arranged on the floor. "What are you doing with these?" Rocky lowered his gaze, his emotions unreadable. "I came to collect a few things to take away." "Are those worthless items something the noble Rocky would desire?" Sitting up on the bed, I looked around the room to see if there were any important items left. Since that was the case, I planned to return to school and continue staying in the dorm, preparing to vacate this place. Rocky held the worthless silver ring, gently rubbing it with his thumb, his voice low and despondent. "Haley, I know you don't believe me, but I really am sincere. I truly only believe in you. No one has ever loved me so sincerely. I don't want to miss out on you." I waved my hand dismissively, scoffing as the scene from earlier replayed mockingly in my mind. "Sincerity? Is it because you love me? That you specially had me bring you food after you finished sleeping with Alice? Should I thank you? I can explain the matter with Alice. We never did anything, and being together was just a casual agreement from before, and I've wanted to break up with her for a long time. I've realized that the person I truly love is. There's no need to discuss this anymore." I coldly interrupted him, my gaze indifferent. The water dripped in the bathroom into the bucket. The knee-high faucet leaked year-round. To save on water bills, I've always used a plastic bucket to collect it. The money saved was just a handful of coins. Insincere love became ridiculous when spoken aloud. At the moment, the deception was exposed. Regardless of sincerity or not, an insurmountable gulf had formed between us. "Actually, Rocky, when you used my brother to get close to me, did you ever think that the boomerang would come back to hit you someday?" "What do you mean?" I didn't respond, just frowned and opened the door, asking him to leave. Seeing my resolute expression, there was a hint of hurt in his eyes. Then he stuffed everything on the floor into his bag and stood up. "Stop pretending to have depression, because with more people like you in this world, the stigma around depression only worsens, and true patients find it harder to get help. Like Jack, there would be one more." After a long pause, the man in front of me slowly nodded. Then Rocky took out a bag of ribs and lotus roots from behind the door. He had seen my message about adding a meal. "Can you make me lotus soup one last time?" "No, your family's chef will make it better. I only like yours." "Haley, why can't you trust me just this once? Give me another chance?" His voice was already choked with emotion. I had never expected that Rocky, the lofty Prince of Washington, would wear such a pleading expression. At this moment, everything felt out of place, no longer fitting the settings of a poverty game. Regardless of the truth of his words, I remained indifferent and silent. He understood my rejection. His hand wanting to reach for mine ultimately fell. Before leaving, Rocky's eyes turned red, and he looked back at me. "Do you still love me?" "I don't love you anymore. Can you love me once more?" "I can't." After Rocky left, I began to tidy up the clutter in the house. I was preparing to return to school next week. As I sorted through things until late at night, I slumped onto the sofa, my gaze landing on a locked box in the corner of the wardrobe. It belonged to my brother, Jack. We were twins, and after our parents divorced, we each formed our own families. We were like the huge cost of mistakes made by our parents when they were young, neither willing to take responsibility nor to look back. So after middle school, Jack and I could only rely on the minimum alimony to support each other. Thinking of this made my heart ache, my hands tightly gripping a jewelry box. This was the birthday gift Jack gave me the year he left. A 6-pointed star necklace studded with tiny diamonds. He smiled brilliantly when he gave it to me, personally putting the necklace around my neck. "Miss, I bought this necklace with my own money. Do you like it? You look so good in it, even better than the models. Although this isn't expensive, I'll work hard to put all the beautiful gems in the world on you." The sincerity in his eyes made me poke his one-sided dimple, nodding with satisfaction. Jack, I believed you, so I have always been waiting. Under the foam board in the jewelry box, something rattled as I shook it. I picked it up and discovered a key. Jack hadn't given me this key when he gave it to me 2 years ago. He must have put it in later. I took it out, thought for a moment, and then my gaze fell on the already chipped box in the corner. The lock clicked open. Inside, there were only 4 items. A painting filled with wilted sunflowers, an album of his favorite band, a diary, and a piece of paper with account passwords written on it. My gaze fell on the black diary, which I picked up and placed on my lap. I began to flip through it from the beginning. The previous entries were merely mundane daily events. And which girl confessed to him at school? This was natural. Jack was handsome and fair-skinned, with charming peach blossom eyes, and an aloof, elegant temperament. Since childhood, I had received quite a few love letters and snacks for him, but perhaps because we were both abandoned from an early age. No matter how much admiration he received from others, he remained sensitive and delicate, which is why he developed the habit of writing diaries. After entering a university, Jack, with his naturally good voice, quickly became the lead singer of the school band, and at every performance there were fangirls screaming for him. As I reminisced, I paused slightly at a page, for Alice's name had appeared in the diary. Moreover, her appearances became increasingly frequent. In fact, I could predict that when I returned to school, there wouldn't be any good outcomes. After all, Alice would never let go of the incident where I hit Rocky. I just didn't expect her retaliation to come so swiftly. Looking at my former bed, piled high with takeout and delivery trash. Even the table under the bed was painted red with insults like slut and a mistress. Mary, a classmate with whom I had a decent relationship, stood beside me, feeling a bit at a loss. Haley, I tried to stop those senior girls, but it didn't work. They said you messed with someone you shouldn't have. Mary took the garbage from my hands, her tone slightly apologetic. I offered a comforting smile and continued tidying up my bed. And Haley, did you see the school forum? They say you're the reason Alice and the mechanical engineering guy, Rocky, are in a relationship. Now there are over 100 comments attacking you, and the evidence inside seems quite substantial. Is any of this true? I paused my cleaning and frowned slightly, taking her phone to scroll through the content briefly. Most of it were photos of Rocky and me entering and exiting school together, as well as screenshots of Alice and Rocky talking together since their freshman summer, but neither of them had ever officially announced it. I pulled a wry smile, realizing they were trying to frame me, claiming they were a couple at this critical moment. To smear my reputation. To outsiders, the timeline made it seem I was indeed an unavoidable intruder. I didn't respond to Mary's questions about the truth. I just pondered for a moment before dialing Alice's number. After 3 rings, she picked up. I got straight to the point. I'm Haley. I'll be waiting for you at the cafe by the North Gate at 3 this afternoon. The playful noise on the other end of the line stopped, and Alice scoffed. Oh, I thought it was someone important. The talented Haley regrets wanting to apologize. It's too late. I don't have time to see you, you daughter of a. It's about Jack. Alice, who had originally intended to use profane language, stopped short when I interrupted her. After a moment of silence, she responded, understood. The sunlight at 3 in the afternoon, though not as harsh as at noon, was still scorching. I stirred my latte and took a small sip, my mind recalling the fragments about Alice in the diary. At that moment, the wind chime at the cafe door rang. The sound of high heels stopped right in front of me. Alice was wearing a blue and white spaghetti strap dress. It was the first time I looked directly at her face. Her cute features exuded a hint of hostility, which was at odds with her overall vibe. I lowered my eyes, clicked my tongue in distaste. Still feeling sick, she sat down in front of me, putting her designer bag down, and asked, "What's up about Jack?" I didn't mince words, I got straight to the point. You liked Jack, didn't you? Alice paused with the menu in her hand, then suddenly tightened her grip on her pastel purple nails. A flash of pain crossed her eyes, but it disappeared in 2 seconds. Where did you hear that? How could I like someone like him? That's hilarious. Her tone was as domineering as usual, but she unnaturally tugged at the corner of her mouth. Jack mentioned you many times in his diary. He said you confessed to him 27 times. I slowly put down the spoon I had been stirring with, looking at her with an unyielding tone. The aroma of coffee filled the air, and at this hour, the owner was still busy in the kitchen. Alice's pupils constricted. She opened her mouth but hesitated, and ultimately didn't deny it. She propped her forehead with her right hand, her eyelashes drooping, no longer looking at me. Her avoidance stirred something in me. I took the painting I had set aside and placed it on the table. It was Jack's possession, a painting filled with wilted sunflowers. So, why do you like Jack and still plagiarize his painting? Why did you take away his chance to compete? Do you know how important this competition was to him? Singing and painting were his favorites since he was a kid. Jack committed suicide 10 days after his painting. Lost Sunflowers was plagiarized, and the one who plagiarized him was Alice. She turned her head, her gaze falling on the framed painting, and suddenly, her emotions turned to hatred. Even after he died, you had to toy with his family. Alice, your affection. Her chest heaved violently, her emotions nearing a breaking point. The word affection seemed to sting her. Alice slammed her cup on the floor, stood up frantically, and shouted at me with red eyes. What do you know? As his sister, what do you understand about him? How dare you question my feelings for him? Yes, I liked him. It was the first time I liked someone so much. I gave him everything I could. I snatched 10 of his favorite band's albums, and not knowing what brand of sneakers he liked, I bought all of them to give him. I got dizzy just watching him play those stupid shooting games, but I learned from scratch to have common topics with him. Whether it was money or sincerity, I offered it all on my knees. What do you understand? When was I ever this humble? He rejected me 27 times, but that's okay. It really doesn't matter. I can persist, because I really liked Jack. Alice cried painfully, her throat already hoarse. She slumped back onto the sofa, despair in her eyes as tears streamed down. But at that moment, my previously manageable heart was thrown into chaos. This truth was even more incomprehensible, so I continued to question her. So, why? Why did you plagiarize him? Do you know he left 10 days after the competition ended? Do you know how deep the wound was on Jack's wrist? How determined he was to die? Alice, tell me, were you not one of the people who killed him? In my panic, I struggled to breathe. That nightmarish scene resurfaced in my mind. Alice, facing my questioning, moved her lips, but she didn't respond. Her eyes filled with confusion. She trembled all over, pulling out a lady's cigarette from her bag, but was stopped by a staff member when she tried to light it. She crushed the cigarette slowly and then said, "That weekend, he went to attend a well-known commercial event I recommended. After he came back, it was like he had become a different person. When I asked him how the performance went, Jack looked like he wanted to kill me, saying I was the most disgusting and hated person to him, calling me a beast and a bitch. I can still remember how he pointed at me and cursed. You have no idea how desperate I felt. My heart felt like it was suffocating. I didn't know what happened. I just heard Dad say that this event had a star agent, and it was a great opportunity, so I secretly told Jack. But afterward, it felt like he pushed me away like I was sentenced to death. I have my own pride. It's fine if he doesn't love me. But why did he have to humiliate me like this? After that, I gave up on liking him. I even wanted to." She choked on her words, unable to finish. But everyone understood. Unrequited love often breeds hatred. Just as Alice said, someone who grew up like a star among people had everything they wanted. Since she couldn't obtain it no matter what, she wanted to destroy everything. Thus, her hatred for Jack didn't end with his death, but spread to me. Taking away my financial aid as a poor student, letting Rocky humiliate me, was just a continuation of her hatred. How did you know about my relationship with Jack? He cherished you as his sister, didn't he? He hid everything from you except good news, afraid you'd worry about him. Honestly, I envy you for having him care so much about you. The ice in my cup had slowly melted, and some latte dripped over the edge. I rubbed the calluses on my hands, recalling Jack's delicate handwriting. I read the diary he left behind. So, did he always hate me, or did he have even the slightest bit of affection for me? I can't answer for him. At my words, Alice's expression immediately lost its luster. Even the hatred faded away. In the diary, during the timeline where Jack cursed Alice, there indeed appeared the commercial event, and afterward, his diary took a turn, from the usual joy and sorrow, to pages filled with only, "Bame, go die." The intensity of those words seemed like he wanted to tear apart the person written on the page. It was a hatred difficult to express in words, but he wrote nothing besides those 4 words. I couldn't know the reasons or other details. I raised my gaze to the dazed Alice and asked, "I'll ask you one last question. Fame, he's your father, isn't he? The leader of the board of trustees. Alice came back to herself, a bit puzzled by this irrelevant question, but nodded. Yes, he is my dad. The heat on the school forum is continuing to rise. On the way back to my dorm, I noticed many passing men and women pointing at me, but all I could think about was Jack, and I didn't even react when someone bumped into me on purpose. A figure blocked my side. Do you not watch where you're going? I glanced sideways. It was Rocky, wearing a baseball cap, cursing at the person who had just bumped into me. His shout made the passers-by stop to stare. Some even took out their phones to take pictures of us. Adulterers. These two still dare to walk together. Seriously, how shameless. I ignored the crowd's comments and furrowed my brow at Rocky. What are you doing here? He lowered his gaze, worry in his eyes, and said in a deep voice. I've posted to clarify that you are innocent and unaware, but I'm still worried that someone will attack you like just now. I rubbed my aching shoulder and glared at him. He didn't even think about who brought this upon us. You haven't been. Before he could finish, a stone was suddenly thrown in my direction. Rocky sensed it first and immediately stepped in front of me. I turned to see where the throw came from, but the guy in the denim jacket quickly vanished into the crowd. Although Rocky reacted in time, the stone still grazed his cheek, drawing blood. He winced, covering his face, with a corner of his mouth twitching, glancing at me now and then. It was as if he was waiting for my consolation. I sighed inwardly and said softly to him, Rocky, there's no need for this. We can't be together. No matter what you do, I won't look back. His eyes, once filled with a glimmer of hope, dimmed completely. Yet, as if self-soothing, he murmured, I won't give up. What are you so obsessed with? I was baffled, unable to understand why he clung to someone who had toyed with his feelings instead of seeking a new target. I've never felt this painful regret before. I don't know, it's such a strange feeling. I just know that I love you and feel guilty towards you. So seeing you or doing something for you makes me feel a bit better, Rocky confessed. But at that moment, the silver ring on his left hand's middle finger glimmered under the streetlight, cheap and tacky. Just like our year together, full of mistakes and hardly worth mentioning. Regarding the post accusing me of being a mistress, it was deleted by the poster in the middle of the night. What was once filled with insults throughout the forum has now been completely wiped clean. Since then, I haven't faced any attacks from Alice. Life returned to its usual calm, except for Rocky's daily disturbances, which made me uneasy. Another sleepless night came. I logged into the account and password left by Jack. It was his art blogger account, which had over 300,000 followers. In this field, he was somewhat famous. His ID was Rinyan. Since childhood, Jack had shown remarkable talent in art and music. Even though I couldn't provide him with the best education in our somewhat tight circumstances, he still shone brightly in his own way. I scrolled through the past posts. His earlier works were mostly of fluffy animals and landscapes, but it was after that point, after Jack participated in a commercial performance in his sophomore year, that his style changed. Fluffy animals turned into dark giants, consuming and tearing him apart. Looking back, everything happened too quickly during that time. From when I discovered he had started taking antidepressants to when he left, only 2 months passed. He was irritable and unstable, and despite my repeated attempts to show concern, I was met with rejection. At that time, I was shocked and helpless, only able to go along with him. Later, Jack's resolute departure left me desperate for an explanation, but all I heard was that everyone said depression and suicide were the answers. Do you know Jack from the art school? I heard he recently committed suicide due to depression. Really? Is that true? There's no way it isn't. The school has been holding psychological education lectures recently, just for this reason. These were the words I overheard from 2 girls discussing while I was on my way back to the dorm after Jack's funeral. In the face of the truth laid out before me, I began to numb and surrender. I gradually accepted this cause of death, no longer struggling with other possibilities. But now, Jack's belongings had opened up another wound. I pulled my thoughts back. The sound of my roommate's breathing, deep and shallow. My hand that was scrolling the mouse paused slightly as I clicked into Jack's account messages. Most were fans urging him to update. When he first stopped updating, many came every day to urge him on. But he had been gone for 2 years, and hardly anyone remembered Rinyan lately. Until I discovered an account with a winter scene for its profile picture, ID'd as River. It had sent messages continuously for 2 years, all after Jack's departure. There were confessions, cries, feelings of unwillingness, and regret. In the messages, I found out she was also a student at a university. The most recent message read, Jack, I'm sorry. I know the truth, but I can't help you get revenge. Upon seeing this, the previously dull profile picture suddenly lit up, she was online. I messaged her. I'm Haley, the blogger's sister. Can we meet? A few seconds later, she replied, sure. She asked to meet me on the playground lawn at night. Serena was wearing a black dress, and the moment she saw me, a glimmer appeared in her gray eyes. She recognized me immediately, and I recognized her too. It was unmistakable, the mole between her brows. The girl in front of me was Jack's class monitor from high school. She once asked me to deliver a music score to Jack, a handwritten guitar sheet that she had copied. It contained Jack's favorite English song, The Last Summer. What left a deep impression on me about Serena was how Jack's eyes sparkled when he received that gift. He loved that present the most. Serena sat down beside me on the grass, watching the freshmen across from us forming a circle and singing, a smile spreading across her lips. I used to sit here too, watching Jack sing. Back then, there were way more people around him than now. I had to search all 360 degrees to find an angle to see his profile. Her eyes were filled with nostalgia, and her voice was soft and gentle, as if time had returned to 2 years ago, when Jack sat in the center of the playground, playing the guitar and singing original love songs. But as the surrounding noise deepened, her expression grew dimmer. I regret it so much, sister. I've had a crush on Jack for 6 years now. I followed him to a university, but until he left, I never got the chance to confess to him properly. If only, just if he knew there was one more person in this world who loved him, would he have been less inclined to leave? Serena's throat choked, her expression sour, as she shared these thoughts with me. I raised my hand to pat her shoulder, wanting to comfort her, but I found her terrifyingly thin, almost just bones. Serena looked again in the direction of the crowd, but her eyes seemed to recall something, turning calm and cold. Sister, do you know the school leader, Bame? My heart jumped, and I nodded slightly. He's the one who caused Jack's death. At that commercial performance in Jack's sophomore year, I was there. Afterward, I wanted to stop him and confess, but I saw him get into a car with Bame and his band members. He deceived Jack into thinking an entertainment company was interested in him, wanting to have dinner to discuss a potential contract. But after that, as Serena mentioned this, her voice trembled constantly. The evening breeze lifted the hem of her dress, and I could feel her whole body shaking. She hugged herself tightly, tears pouring down. After Jack died, I secretly investigated Bame. I had a gut feeling he was involved. I knew he often dined at the Mingyu Hotel with the board of directors, so I took a part-time job there for 2 whole years. 2 years. I finally got evidence after recording him when he was drunk. She lowered her head and rummaged through her bag for her phone, but in her haste, a bottle of pills fell out. I froze. When I saw it clearly, my nose suddenly felt sour. I knew all too well what kind of medication it was. Jack had taken it, and I had bought it for Rocky as well. Her bony hand trembled as she opened a recording and handed me one of the earbuds. At first, there was a chaotic background noise, with a few men flattering each other. Then, suddenly, a deep male voice spoke. The ones served up this time aren't much to savor. Boss Bame is picky. This little star looks pretty good, but not good enough for you. Not even close. No lies. Over the years, the lead singer of that previous band has always been my favorite. I've had my eye on him since the orientation. Afterward, I tricked him into thinking that the Starry Entertainment would sign his whole band, so he would come to the drinking party, get completely drunk, and I got him into bed. But he was delicate and worth it. Which one? The one who committed suicide later, named Jack. I was shocked when he committed suicide. Hurry up and get the school to arrange psychological lectures. Really fragile. Otherwise, I could have brought him along to have some fun. The background noise gradually faded, and I could hear a faint electrical hum through the earbuds. It wasn't until I tasted blood in my mouth that I barely snapped back to reality. My chest heaved violently, and my brain felt starved for oxygen, making it hard to speak. I trembled as I pulled a plastic bag from my bag and covered my mouth and nose. On the day Jack committed suicide, I had felt the same kind of confusion and difficulty breathing on the way to the hospital. The doctor said it was respiratory alkalosis, and if things got critical, using a plastic bag to cover the mouth and nose could help. I remembered that. Serena noticed something was off with me. She quickly put her phone away, squatted down, and surrounded me. As my mind slowly cleared, I finally pieced together everything that had happened to Jack. The drastic changes in his diary and artwork, his sudden harsh words toward Alice, his abrupt descent into depression, and his resolute decision to die, all had answers now. Seeing my eyes gradually clear, Serena could no longer hold back. She hugged my neck tightly and cried out loud, "Sister, but what can we do? Even with this recording, We can't compete with Bame. He has fame and power in Washington. We simply have no power at all. Jack must have felt this same desperation. What chance do ordinary people have against those at the pinnacle of power? Is swallowing it the only option? A recording and a victim already departed from this world can never form a strong chain of evidence. Even if Bame were to be convicted, would that punishment be enough? It's very likely he would escape. I looked up at the sky. Thick clouds were slowly covering the moon. Lowering my gaze, I wiped away Serena's tears and smiled encouragingly. For these years, thank you for your hard work. I want to thank you for Jack. Thank you for loving him for so many years. After that night, I started to have a high fever, oscillating between consciousness and dreams, where chaotic nightmares intertwined. Finally, after an important class ended, I collapsed at the classroom door and was sent to the hospital. I woke up in a dream where Jack, with blood tears streaming down his face, was questioning me about why I had left him at home. Such scenes didn't repeat, yet the feeling remained unchanged, and the dreams kept shifting back and forth. Under a dim yellow light, my head throbbed painfully, and I opened my sore eyes. I saw a figure sitting at the head of my bed. He was wearing a blue and white shirt. His gaze focused intently on me. After confirming I was finally awake, his eyes suddenly turned red. Rocky picked up a cup of hot water from the table and helped me sit up. I was so parched that I drank it all in a few gulps. The doctor said you have a viral infection. Why have you been so careless about your health? He asked, but I didn't respond. What exactly happened? I stared at the ceiling, still not answering, acting as if I hadn't heard. In the following month, Rocky stayed by my side day and night, taking care of me meticulously. At first, he would ask me a few questions, but my persistent silence made him give up on communication. On the day before my discharge, I watched Rocky, who was focused on peeling an apple for me, lost in thought. The moonlight was bright that night, and a classic love movie about lovers' tragic endings was playing in the ward, with actors crying heart-wrenchingly. I softly asked Rocky, "Do you really like me?" He raised his eyes to look at me. His eyes brightened, and without any hesitation, he nodded, saying, "I do, very much." Upon hearing this, I tightened my grip around the six-pointed star necklace around my neck. "If you really like me, then I want to kill someone. Can you help me?" Rocky used his family connections, and with the excuse that his parents wanted to start a new education brand, he invited Bame over for dinner at his home. Rocky's parents were already family friends with Bame, so Bame let his guard down. Half an hour after the scheduled time, a black sedan stopped outside the abandoned factory where I was waiting. Rocky dragged the unconscious Bame out of the car and threw him onto the ground. "You don't need to worry about the rest. Thanks. When you confess, I won't mention you." I nonchalantly distanced myself from the situation. He looked at me, hesitating to speak, his expression sorrowful, as if he still didn't want to see me make this choice. "Haley, your brother is already dead. Why can't you let go of the past and start anew?" "You shouldn't. Shh. Don't say anymore. This is how it should be, right? He caused my brother's death. Shouldn't he pay with his life? Apart from the obsession of being a sister, who should avenge him? I also wanted to. Since childhood, I had stood in front of Jack, scaring away the seniors who bullied him, helping him chase away spiders and cockroaches, wiping away his tears when he missed our parents. So he always said I was the bravest superhero sister in the world. And this time, knowing the truth, I also shouldn't be timid in front of him, right? It should be this way. I tied Bame to a chair. I cleared away all his clothes and took out his phone, lifting Bame's finger to unlock it with his fingerprint. My purpose was clear. At the very bottom of the album, there was an anonymous album. When I clicked in, as expected, there were an astonishing number of videos. People like Bame are very likely to have such things. Scrolling down, I finally found the spring of the previous year. After confirming, I numbly closed my eyes. I picked up the water bottle beside me and splashed it on Bame to wake him up. He choked on his breath, panic filling his murky eyes. When he saw me clearly, confusion enveloped him. "Who are you?" I didn't respond. Bame looked around, trying to feign calm as he probed. "Do we have any grievances? Do you remember Jack?" Upon hearing this, Bame furrowed his brow, his shoulders twitching slightly as he tried to break free. But it was useless. The way I tied him made his palms bleed. "I don't know him. I think there must be some misunderstanding. I'm his sister. You don't need to be nervous. I just have a few questions to ask you." At this moment, he realized my identity and felt hopelessly bound. Finally, he couldn't hide his panic, and his body started to tremble. Continuing to pretend was clearly futile. He understood the hatred and the grudge. With his head bowed, he frantically pleaded, even sweating profusely. "I'm sorry. What happened to your brother was just me being confused after drinking. If you want money for compensation or want me to plead guilty, I'll cooperate. As long as you leave me a way out, I'll agree to anything." I stared at him expressionlessly, picking up the knife I had prepared beforehand. Seeing that I was unmoved by his temptations, he began to threaten me. "Think carefully. If you do anything extreme, you'll also bear legal responsibility. Besides, with just a flick of my finger, I can make it so no one knows you died in Washington." I sneered, pausing with the knife in my hand, not caring about his threats. I just thought of the video from earlier and asked, "I want to know, besides this phone, are there any backups of these videos?" Bame's eyes darkened, clearly realizing what video I was referring to. The flesh on his face quivered, and cold sweat began to pour down. He then trembled and responded, "There aren't any." Seeing this, I raised my hand and, before he could react, unhesitatingly brought the knife down onto his right hand. In an instant, the warehouse filled with Bame's agonizing screams. "Just be honest, don't waste my time." I numbly lowered my gaze to see blood gushing out, pooling on the ground. When he still didn't respond, I raised my hand again, aiming for his left hand. In the study on the second floor of my house, the third room on the left at the top of the stairs, the second drawer from the back of the cabinet. The key is the smallest one on that set of keys on the ground. I turned my head to look at the set of keys, carefully considering the truth in his words. After confirming he was mostly telling the truth, I nodded and continued to pick up the blade. Seeing this, he panicked and tried to lean back with the chair. You didn't say that if I answered questions, you would." The fear of death made it hard for Bame to articulate, but it didn't matter. This would be the last sentence of his life. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Forget it. Keep your voice down. Perhaps that way, I'll go a bit easier on you." After everything was cleaned up, it was already 3 in the morning. I turned off my phone, realizing that I didn't have much time left. Before turning myself in, there were some things I needed to clarify. I found a small hotel and quickly took a shower. Then I arranged to meet Serena. When she saw my pale face, she looked a bit worried. "Take care of your health, even if we can't avenge Jack. We can't just go on living in a daze. He wouldn't be happy seeing you like this." I nodded and tidied my slightly messy hair. I didn't plan to tell Serena about what happened last night. I wanted her to think it was just fate. I pulled out the golden card Rocky gave me from my pocket, and I put all the money I had on it, reaching a total of 800,000. "This card is for you." She wanted to refuse, but I shook my head. "Serena, you are one of the few people who genuinely care about us siblings. Actually, Jack and I didn't receive much kindness growing up, so our way of giving back might be clumsy. When we were little, I often heard our parents say they should have drowned me and Jack in the toilet back then. When I heard those words, I was only scared. But recently, I've started to feel that even the parents who don't wish their children to survive may not really believe those children shouldn't exist in this world. So, that's why I struggled through the mire until I was 20, still filthy and stinking. The people I wanted to protect were torn apart, and the ones I tried to save were mere illusions. In the end, I gained a few more years from malice. Seeing this, Serena suddenly grabbed my hand, her grip tightening until my wrist turned red. "Don't think like that. Meeting you and Jack is the luckiest thing for me. We don't have anyone who shouldn't exist, especially not you two." I was taken aback, looking at her determined eyes and managing a small smile, but it felt like she was telling a kind lie. Serena's tightly clenched hand was still bony, her clothes hanging loosely on her frail frame. Without us, she would have had a brighter life. As summer drew to a close, the cicadas' chirping gradually faded. I raised my hand to smooth the loose strands of hair on her forehead. "Serena, after this summer, let's start a new life. Forget about Jack and me." After meeting with Serena, I went to find Alice. She was absent-mindedly stirring the ice cubes in her cup. It was probably because her father was missing. I had seen Alice's call when I went through Bame's phone last night. I had pressed decline. Her mother passed away when she was young, and Bame raised her, so their bond must be deeper than a typical father-daughter relationship. I didn't say much to Alice. After all, no matter how reasonable the reasons were, we were enemies. She had plagiarized Jack's work, which was an undeniable fact. So I only handed her an old phone and the key to Bame's study. I destroyed the other keys. The phone contained recordings of her father Bame drunkenly confessing to violating Jack at the Mingyu Hotel, as well as videos of Bame violating Jack and the locations of those backups. There were also photos of Jack's diary entries from the early days when he had a pleasant time with Alice. She seemed puzzled about why I was giving her this phone. I lowered my gaze and smiled. The password is Jack's birthday. Do you remember? Alice nodded. 030209. It seemed that everything she had said was indeed somewhat credible. After all, she still remembered Jack's birthday. Alice, there are only 4 items left from Jack. And one of them is the album by the Yenjo band that you gifted him. If you look at the contents of the phone, you will know the whole truth. He regarded you as a very good friend while he was alive. At my intentional hint, a frenzied hope returned to her gaze, and she took out her phone to look it up. I didn't stop her and didn't linger. I planned to find a place to take a nap. After waking up, I would turn myself in. This nap was exceptionally peaceful, and when I woke up, I had no idea how much time had passed. I opened my phone, and the bright light made me squint, but I quickly noticed the latest headlines. In the North Industrial District of Washington, a dismemberment case occurred with extremely brutal methods. Upon reading this, I felt no unease as the instigator. I simply browsed through the content calmly. The report confirmed the identity of the deceased, some senior officer named Bame, and the perpetrator was still being pursued. Among the hot comments below, my friend in the police station said he was cut into 67 pieces. One part was directly, "It's one of the most heinous cases in Washington in recent years. How much hatred and resentment could this possibly be?" I lowered my head and swiped the screen, still feeling no particular emotion. After a while, I set down my phone, preparing to head to the police station. At that moment, a new notification appeared before my eyes. The perpetrator of the dismemberment case has turned himself in. I paused, my finger hovering, frowning. What was going on? I clicked on the content and found that while the report stated the perpetrator had turned himself in, it didn't mention any names. The only person who knew about this was Rocky. He was the only one I could think of. Could it be him? A chill ran down my back, and just then, my phone rang in my palm. I looked down to see it was my roommate Mary. "Haley, where are you? Rocky asked me to give you something. Can you come pick it up now?" I took a deep breath, pausing in silence for a moment before softly responding. "Okay." What Rocky left me was a bank card and a note. "Haley, go abroad for 2 years. I'll take the blame for this. After all, my family connections can minimize my punishment. My dad doesn't love me, but he's terrified of losing face. He'll handle it, don't worry. And all of this is to pay off what I owe you. Please don't turn yourself in again. Take care." I couldn't articulate my feelings. The cicada chirps in my ears felt distant and near. When the edges of the note crumpled in my grip, I gradually came back to my senses. I tucked the bank card away into my pocket, regained my composure, and thanked Mary. Outside the school gate, I hailed a taxi. The driver asked me where I was going. "Take me to the North Industrial District Police Station." "What?" "Never mind. Take me to the cemetery." That night, I stayed by Jack's grave for the entire night. The next day, I left the country. In these years abroad, the main theme of my life was updating Jack's painting account. Fortunately, I had often received commissions before, and though my skills couldn't compare to his talent, over 5 years, I gained quite a few followers. This spring, I plan to return home. After arriving in Washington, Serena greeted me at the airport with a bouquet of tulips. She had become a top agent at an entertainment company. As we sat face to face, tears filled her eyes as she gazed at me. "I didn't expect to see you again. Thank you for everything you've done." Her voice was choked, and after half a minute of sobbing, she continued, saying that after Bame's death, her depression seemed to vanish completely, and she was no longer living in the past, slowly growing numb with regret. Hearing this, I felt comforted, just like before, and I patted her shoulder. It was so good. She had finally gained some weight. At this moment, Serena seemed to remember something, bowed her head, and pulled a card from her bag, handing it to me. "Miss, there's 1.42 million here, which is my salary over the past few years, plus the 800,000 you gave me. I've saved it all up. You must accept it." I didn't take it. Seeing this, Serena, unwilling to give up, placed it beside my hand. Then she continued telling me about the events of these years. She said that after Rocky turned himself in, he received forgiveness from the victim's family, which was Alice's forgiveness. Afterward, Rocky's family hired the best lawyers and presented earlier hospital diagnoses of bipolar disorder. With all these conditions, Rocky was sentenced to 10 years. As for Alice, for reasons unknown, she lost her sanity shortly after her father's death 5 years ago. She has been in a psychiatric hospital ever since, but every spring, she visits the cemetery to pay her respects. Hearing this, I nodded slightly. When these people were mentioned, they felt both strange and familiar, as if I had known them in a past life. Subconsciously, I wanted to ignore them. As our conversation came to a close, I asked Serena for some gossip. So, have you dated anyone in the past 5 years? Her eyes dimmed, and she crossed her hands, rubbing them together. No, why not? Because the person I met in my youth was too stunning. In the dead of night, a gentle breeze blew through. I opened my account and posted a winter landscape painting that Jack had left behind during his lifetime. At the bottom of the painting, there was a line of text. I only wish that in the next life, you can live a smooth and fulfilling life. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.